Hi everyone, this is Nathan from Snap and welcome to another of our Snap XMP webinars. Today we're going to be looking at creating multilingual surveys and forms and going through a few considerations to be aware of when producing your projects in different languages. It should take about 30 minutes and as ever there's plenty of resources available on our support hub which I'll be pointing you to at the end. First of all, we'll take a look at the language templates that are supplied with Snap XMP. I'll then be showing you how to add additional languages to these. I'll then take you through making use of the translation tool, which allows for easy external translations to take place. And finally, we'll discuss redirecting your respondents off to a relevant thank you page or perhaps follow-on page having completed the form. And along the way, I'll be pointing you out a few of the things to consider as you go about building your multilingual projects. A few key benefits to creating multilingual projects in Snap. From the respondent's perspective, they only receive one link and that link then offers them the choice of language as they continue. So you aren't faced with having to send out multiple links and the respondent isn't faced with a decision as to which link to click. If you're making use of our translation tool, you aren't going to be copying and pasting text from a document into Snap, which means you're removing the danger of accidentally pasting text into the wrong question. And I'm sure you've all seen the online pictures of road signs which read something along the lines of, "I'm not in the office at the moment right now." Because we are using just the one link to one survey, all the data is contained in one survey file, meaning that you can analyse the data all together, but equally you can easily compare data based on the language choice. And the big one, by offering your surveys in a variety of different languages, you are making your surveys more accessible and inclusive, which drives greater visibility and engagement, which also hopefully then leads on to high response rates. Okay, let's head into the software and have a look at how we can set up your multilingual projects. So I'm going to be working in the webinars folder today, and I'm going to create a brand new survey. As ever, our starting point for a survey is a template. Remember, you can also create your own templates, which would contain your own logos, preferred languages, maybe some preset questions and statements. But moving back to the template supplied with Snap, I'm going to be making use of the blank template with Welsh. Now, the templates you see in this list, they will differ depending upon where you are in the world. So in the UK, we have blank with Welsh and obviously the standard blank one. If you are in the US, you will have a blank with French and blank with Spanish. Those are the two sort of sets of default sort of installed templates. For those of you that are listening in from Europe, we've also got a set of templates available to download that will include Dutch and French, where these are the only languages in those templates, as well as Dutch with English and Dutch with English and French. And at the end of today's session, I'll be pointing you off to a page where you can download those additional language templates. But I'm going to go ahead and create a survey using the Welsh template. Just give that a name of languages demo. And as I said, we're going to create that in the webinars folder. As with all our templates, this has automatically created a version that is suitable for a PC as well as a tablet and a phone, and there's also a paper copy there. And being that it's a Welsh template, of course, it's also created a Welsh edition, one for each of the different modes. Built into the template are a number of pre-translated elements, including this initial translation question. And for those that are doing surveys in English and Welsh, you'll know that the Welsh does need to appear first when you're sort of running multilingual surveys. So whilst it does look like English appears in this list first, if I just right click on this question, you'll notice it is set to alphabetical. So actually when it's run as a live survey, Cymraeg, if that's how you pronounce it, will actually appear first. If I click on one of the Welsh editions down the bottom and head to questionnaire properties, and if I come down to buttons, you can see that the CSS buttons have automatically been translated into Welsh for you. Obviously, if we chose a different language, they'd be in a different language. And whilst we're talking about buttons, just a reminder that you can actually overtype these with your own text. So if you're perhaps running a project which is perhaps more of a registration form, rather than having the word submit, then you could just overwrite that with the word register, obviously in Welsh. And coming down to text at the bottom, these are the messages which might appear when a survey is being completed, and these have also been translated for you. Now, my Welsh isn't the best, but I do believe this line, which I've got highlighted now, reads something along the lines of, please provide a valid answer for this question. Okay, let's head back to the design window. I'm going to go back to the English edition. And there's a number of different options of how you go about designing your multilingual surveys. Initially, I'm going to add some text into my title. That's just going to be about you. And I'll go ahead and just add a single choice question, which is just going to be, how many children live in your household? I'll just have a couple of answers. Okay, that's as much as we're going to sort of type today. If we then move into my Welsh edition, you can see that the text is greyed out, and one option would just be to overtype it. Now, as I said, my Welsh really isn't the best, but I believe one translation for that might be CHI. Just to confirm, I've overtyped that in the Welsh edition. That has not made any amendments to the English edition. I could hand Snap over to a colleague who speaks Welsh, but the likelihood is that whilst they do speak Welsh, they probably don't speak Snap. And as such, they're going to end up making changes to the survey, such as perhaps adding extra questions or answers, maybe moving things around. So ideally, you don't want to be doing what I've just done there, which is passing Snap over to anyone and then attempting to overtype it. Instead, we're going to make use of the translation tool. Now, the basic principle here is that we will export a text file. Someone will overtype that text file, and then we're going to re-import it back in. So if I go into the translation wizard, and initially we're going to prepare an external translation. And I'm going to pop that onto my desktop, so just point it off so it creates a file on my desktop. And I'm just going to put the letter E at the end of this file, just so I know that it's the English text file. And I'll just go ahead and press start, which will create the file. So you can see it gives you a little report at the bottom telling you how many questions and words are going to be translated. I have got a couple of messages at the bottom, one being that there's two variables that produce no content. This is actually just the logos in my survey. I've got two logos today, one for my paper survey and a different logo for each of the online surveys or online editions. So I'll click OK. And if we go and look at the file on my desktop, so there's my English file. If I double click on this one, so this is what you would send off to your colleague or perhaps a translation team. And it gives some instructions at the top telling you what to do, which is basically translate everything between the words start and end. So there's start, and I've got end down the bottom. So we're not worrying about all the text above that, just everything in between. Now, as I said, Welsh really isn't my speciality, so rather than attempting to translate this now, I'm going to make use of one that I'd prepared already. Again, if I just double click on that one, it's exactly the same structure, everything's in the same position, but as you can see, everything between start and end is now in Welsh. Hopefully the correct Welsh. And then it's simply a case of re-importing this new file. So I've got my original file with the E, I've got my new file with the W, so back into Snap, back to File and Translation. And this time we will apply that external translation. So it's already pointing off to my English file. I'm just now going to point it off to the Welsh file, the one with the W. Now today we've obviously just got English and Welsh, so obviously you may well have sort of multiple sort of languages in your project, so just need to make sure that the right text file is pointing off to the right language edition. And if you remember earlier, I did attempt to translate the word about you with CHI. I've now got a full translation, so anything which I attempted to write earlier is going to be overwritten by this text file. Okay, so that's imported that file. There are a couple of messages which have popped up which we just need to sort of double check over. Most of these are actually just telling me that the text in my Welsh text file was exactly the same as the English in the English text file. So things like the number 1 and number 1, exactly the same in both files. Same with that question at the beginning, which was which language do you want to be to complete the survey in? That was effectively a dual language survey. And then again at the bottom, I've just got some messages saying a couple of variables weren't translated, and that was N1 and N2, which again, that was the two logos in my survey. Okay, and that's it. So importing that file has automatically brought the text into my Welsh edition. That saved us the fact that we haven't had to mess around with sort of word copying and pasting sort of questions and answers one at a time. Now, a few key benefits to using that translation tool include the fact that certain languages have different sort of characters and alphabets, and sometimes these can get lost when you're copying them across from different sort of programs and systems. So whereas using this text file system, that import will import all the different letters across as you would hope. And because you're not copying and pasting, there's no danger of copying across the wrong set of answers into the wrong question. And on top of that, you don't have to contend with Word doing its very best to make a mess of the document as it's sent from person to person with the translations being added. Now, of course, you might have a requirement to create a survey or form in a different language. So we can simply head up to the additions icon and we can just click on language and add a language. And today, I'm just going to choose Spanish, which is on this initial list, but if the language you're looking for isn't on the initial list, then just click on more and the full list of languages will be available in there. But I'm going to stick with Spanish today and click OK. So that's added Spanish along with the Welsh and English. So then it would just be a case of getting another text file translated and re-importing. Now, before I move on, I did just want to point you in the direction of the reference window, which contains a number of different survey packs. So the one which comes built into Snap is called the reference survey pack. And this is what actually sort of runs all your templates. And we've got a number of different questions in here. And these have been translated for you. So if I drop down the menu and choose Welsh, you can see we've got Welsh. If I choose a character-based language, such as perhaps Arabic or Urdu, you can see quite a few sort of character-based languages revert to the formatting sort of right to left. So it's all reverted that for you. When I head back to English, and then it's just a case of taking a question, dragging it across, and I can drop it above, below, or replace it. So I'm going to drop it below. And there we've got the extra question. If I head back to my online editions, that's obviously popped it into English, but it's also popped it into Welsh and Spanish. Now, I mentioned the different templates which get installed when you install Snap. So as I said, if you are in the US, you will end up getting a number of different templates. So you'll have a blank template, but also one with French and Spanish. If you are, as I said, calling in from Europe, then you can download an additional survey pack, which would give you a blank Dutch one. So it doesn't contain English. Likewise, it doesn't contain English for the French one. and there's a Dutch one which does contain English and a Dutch one which does contain English and French. So as I said, I'll be pointing you at the end of this webinar to where you can download those additional survey packs. And in terms of these survey packs, the idea really is that, yes, you can make use of the survey pack which we supply, but ideally you would actually create your own survey pack with your own questions and your own translations in there. And what we have actually done is given you a survey pack called User Survey Pack, and this is one that you can edit to add your own sort of questions in there and translations. Now, I'm actually just going to delete that last question. Now, on the subject of translations, earlier we looked at the text section, which was the messages which might pop up during a live survey. And you do have the option to overwrite the text in these. You just need to bear in mind, if you are going to overwrite the text in the English, you would probably also want to override the text in the Welsh. And the easiest way to do that would be to basically take the English text file, which you can see it's just pointing off to a file on your computer. Send that off to, so basically edit any messages you want to, send the edited message file off to a colleague that speaks whichever language you're making use of, and then again in the Welsh edition, just go and find that updated file. Alternatively, if you are just editing one or two messages, then of course you can just go down and find the relevant message, but again, just need to be really careful that you're popping the right message into the right line. Okay, so we now have a questionnaire that's been translated along with a question which asks them for their preferred language to continue, which has then been translated or helped to translate the navigational buttons and the pop-up messages. Let's now have a think about some of the other things which you might need to consider. So first off, when a respondent presses the submit button, so when they kind of finished filling in the survey and they press submit, they're going to be sent off by default to a thank you page, and that's a standard thank you page built into Snap. Ideally, regardless of whether you are running a multilingual project or not, you would actually redirect them off to somewhere a little bit more relevant to the form that they've just completed. And today, obviously, we are talking about different languages, so if they fill out the survey in English, we ideally want to send them off to an English thank you message. And if they're filling it out in Welsh or Spanish, they're going to go off to a Spanish or Welsh thank you message. So today, I've got a number of different thank you messages. I've got a thank you message in English. I'm just going to copy that text a second. And I've got a thank you message in Welsh. So if I go back into my survey in Snap, and to do this, we need to create a derived variable. So into the variables window and create a new one. Just save what I've done. And I'm just going to give it a name of web page. And they're going to go off to one of sort of two different places. If they fill the survey out in English, they're going to see this as a thank you page. If they fill the survey out in Welsh, they're going to see this thank you page. And then we need to specify when will they see each of the pages. So we're going to make use of that question at the beginning of the survey, which is their preferred language. It's called id.language by default. So if id.language equals 1, which is English, they will see that message, whilst if id.language equals 2, they will see the Welsh thank you message. Obviously, if you've got 5 or 6 different languages, you would just add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and your various different web addresses down below. So I'm going to take the name of that variable and copy it. And if I now go back into my design window, as I said, it's based on this question. So if we were going to do Spanish, Spanish would be number 3. You can see down the bottom it says id.language. But if we go into questionnaire properties, rather than sending off to the default English page, we're going to send them off to a web page. And again, rather than just sending them off to one set page, what we're actually going to do is whatever the answer to the web page question, which we just created, is what will be inserted into that that line there. And just note that those are the extra sort of curly brackets at the end, either side of that. Okay, going to move into a different survey now, so I'm just going to close this one down. So I'm going to move into a survey which has got just a few more questions already input. So we talked a little bit about inclusivity today, and of course accessibility is a big part of that. So again, it's really important to consider the alt text which sits on your different images, and that's the hover text which is read out by a text reader program that's often used by someone that might be sort of visually impaired. So for every image in the survey, we need to think about what sort of hover text is going to be there. So if I double click on, I'm on my English edition at the moment in my image, you can see I've got the text company logo. So that's the text which will be read out loud to a respondent that's visually impaired. When I go into the Welsh edition, you can see I've got that translated text. Same for Dutch, etc. Okay, so yeah, really important step that, just to make sure that just because you're doing a survey in a different language, you don't lose track of the sort of accessibility options. And the same applies to if you're running quotas and screenouts in your survey. So if I go up to view and quotas and screenouts, I've got a quota here where I want to make sure I can only collect a maximum of 25 people for each of my age group questions. This is the message which they're going to get sent to if the 26th person comes along, basically saying thank you, but we've already received the number of people we need. Again, we've got, this survey has many different languages going. If I look at the Welsh, there's my Welsh. If I look at Dutch, there's my Dutch. So again, just making sure that you are making use of all the sort of translated options. If you're running alerts in your survey, I come down to my alerts. Again, we just need to bear in mind that these need to be sent out in the correct language. So if someone's filling my survey out in English, then they're going to get a message when they press submit emailed to them in English. So based on id.language equals 1. Whilst in this survey, number 10 is Welsh. So there's my Welsh text. I think that one's probably Dutch. So again, just being careful that you're covering all the options. Another perhaps use of language additions is basically just different ways of phrasing questions. So if we think of perhaps a child that might be filling in the survey, you might be running a survey which is being conducted by adults, but also there's going to be children filling in that same survey. So we sometimes just need to think about slight variations in how questions and answers are phrased. And in my example today, I'm actually already making use of this. This survey's got an English version. It's also got a US version, which seems a bit strange because they're both English. But if I look at my two different versions, so my title is About You in the English, in the UK version. In the US version, it's About Yourself. And typically, I believe if you're in the US, you're probably more likely to say check a box, whilst if you're in the UK, you're probably more likely to say tick a box. So it just gives you the option to sort of think about how you phrase questions. So again, if you think about that from, I said, an adult and child point of view, keeping it really simple, you might have a gender-based question, and the adult's version might be, are you male or female, versus the children's version of are you a boy or a girl? So it's the same question and meaning, it's just slightly different wording. Or another use might be that you're running a survey which is basically for internal staff, but also external customers. So it's the same survey, but the internal version might make use of business jargon, where the external version for external sort of customers would be sort of written more in sort of layman's terms. And if there are certain sections or questions which are just for perhaps the internal members, then you can route them using that id.language question that we talked about earlier. So although today we're very much been talking about language additions being English and Welsh and French, etc., really a language addition is just a label for different wording, really. So you could go up to the language additions, you could create a new language, but I could choose English again and overtype that with child. So it is really just a label for your different language. You are best to make sure you try and choose the correct language from the drop down though, because if you remember, that's actually what drives what sort of next and submit buttons you have and what error messages you have should someone sort of need any prompting when they're filling in the survey. Okay, the final thing to consider today is your analysis. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, but we talked a bit about your questionnaires and forms being multilingual and inclusive, but the same applies to your analysis. So if someone's going to take the time to give you their data, it's only right that you offer them something in return and in a format that works for them. So in this survey, I've got a number of sort of tables and charts and reports already set up. So I'm just going to double click on AN1. So nice simple table based on, but let's have a quick look and see what it's based on, but it's based on question 3 and question 1. And obviously it's all in English by default because that's the default language for this particular survey. If I go to base and labels, we can just drop down the language drop down, and whatever languages you have in your survey will be available in this list. And again, if I was to choose character-based language, it all sort of sorts the formatting out for you as well. Okay. And exactly the same idea with your charts. Open up AN10. Again, exactly the same into the base and labels. And we can just adjust. And again, just on that note, you have got the option to sort of, if you are doing, obviously most of these don't display on your charts anyway, but for tables, things like the word total and base show up, so you can overtype those as well and amend the wording if you wish. Likewise with the words sort of no reply and not asked and errors and stuff, you can edit that text if you were to include them. And if we have a very quick look at a report, so these are the standard reports which are built into Snap. So I'm just going to look at the summary report. We have a tailor setting at the beginning of that report. And again, it's just a case of choosing your preferred language. I just quickly preview this one. So that's updated my charts. What it hasn't done though is update the introduction. So, and this introduction could be edited anyway. So what you will need to do is just go into option number 4 and think about editing this text as well. So it may well be that if you've got 3 or 4 different languages built into your survey, that you clone these reports a couple of times and have one which is a report in English and one which is in Dutch, etc., etc. Now, just before we finish, I did just very quickly want to mention that obviously today I've been showing you how to create surveys in Snap Desktop. If you are creating your surveys direct in Snap Online, it was really just to say that all the templates that we've been talking about today are available in Snap Online as well. So wherever you are, you can create your multilingual projects and surveys. Okay, so I've created a new survey using a template provided by Snap, which already had the Welsh language edition built into it. We've added additional language additions. We've used the translation tool to export a text file ready to be translated and then imported. We've had a quick look at the options for creating analysis and reports in different languages. And along the way, we've been through a number of other different things to consider, depending on what type of project that you're running. That covers everything that I was looking to show you today. Hopefully it's shown you how quick and easy it is to build and translate your multilingual surveys and projects in Snap XMP. On screen now are a few QR codes which will take you off to our support hub pages. The first 2 QR codes will take you off to a couple of pages covering languages as a whole and also taking you through that translation tool that I showed you earlier. For anyone looking to run surveys in Dutch or French, or a combination of the two, with or without English, then the third QR will take you to a page where you can actually download that extra survey pack containing those additional language templates. And if you have got a spare 2 minutes, I'd be grateful if you'd complete our short survey about today's webinar. This can be accessed via the QR code on the right. There is also a link in the chat of this Teams call, and you all will receive an email from me in an hour or so, which will then contain a link off to all these resources as well as the feedback form. So thank you very much for joining me, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.